Never was it God's intention for us to live a life with anxiety, for us to live a life of stress. God's heart and desire was for us to always be in unity and alignment with Him. And so we are going to offer something that is called the Blessed Life. It is a financial stewardship study that is truly going to change the way you think about finances. God's intention from the very beginning was for us to trust Him because He wanted our hearts to be aligned with Him, and He wanted to have a life of blessings for us. Tithing is a principle that is all over the Bible. In Genesis chapter 14, 19 through 20, this was the first example of a tithe. It says, "And He blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything." As God continued to lead people and as God continued to challenge those, we see over scripture and over that the tithe was something that He wanted us to take serious, and the only topic in the entire Bible that He actually asked us to test Him. In Malachi chapter 3, verse 8-9, it says, "Will a man rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how have I robbed you?" And He says, "In your tithes and contributions. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation, of you." And this was just a moment where God was reminding those that followed Him that there's a better way of living. We talk about tithing, we talk about giving every week at South Hills. We want to take 6 weeks to walk you through a journey that is going to transform your heart and transform your life. And we're going to be offering it on a Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where you can log in online. So I'm going to ask you to take some time to join us on this series. And our CFO is actually going to be hosting and leading us through it. His name is Steve Robinson, and you can email him to reserve your spot, steve.robinson@southhills.org. And I don't want you to miss it. Why? Because it truly is going to bless your life.
You know, it's times like this that we're reminded that this isn't heaven. And no matter how much we want it to be, no matter how much effort we put into this, no matter how much we think we have to have right now, it just isn't heaven. It's going to go away. In fact, we're only here for a short little blip. We're on the other side forever, but we're here for a short time, very short time. But the best thing about the little blip that we're on right now is relationships. It's the best thing that we have in this little tiny blip. In fact, last week, Melanie and I, we celebrated our 18th wedding anniversary. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, do you have that? Look how young we were, right? Now, I just wanted to give you a little insight on this. This was not always a love story, okay? I'm going to give you a little example of this. We had our very first date in November of 1997. We did have a second date, but it was June of 2002, okay? So for all of you mathematicians, that's 5 years from our first date to our second date. That's because the first date was terrible. We were at Disneyland, so you're thinking, okay, it's gonna be fun. It was not. She didn't like me, I liked her, and I don't know why. I mean, what's not to like? I mean, anyways, she didn't like me at all, and so it was so bad. Now, here's how bad this date got. On the way home, she falls asleep. Now, you know that's a bad date when they fall. But here's the deal. We went from Disneyland, which is in Anaheim, to our dorm in Fullerton. Okay, so if you know that drive, that's about 4 minutes, okay? I mean, if you look at a map, they look like they're on the same piece of property. So, like, she said she was asleep, but I think she was just faking because she didn't want to talk to me. So, but here's the deal. I'm slick, okay, because I gave her my sweater, right? See, guys, if you need tips, love tips, check this out. So I give her my sweater thinking I'm gonna need to get the sweater back, so then therefore she's gonna have to see me again. So I put my sweater on her, being the gentleman that I am. I stop at the dorm, she suddenly wakes up, she gets up, she goes, okay, thanks, bye, closes the door. I'm like, oh, all right, well, no, good night hug, whatever. But she has my sweater, so I'll see her again. About 2 seconds later, I see her coming back from my rearview mirror, and I'm thinking, oh, she forgot to give me a little kiss or whatever. I get it. Opens the door, throws the sweater in the car, closes the door, and leaves. Okay? That's how the date went. Now, I don't want this person to do well now, because now she's my enemy. She hurt my ego. She hurt my pride. I did not want, and I would see her every now and then. So a couple of years later, we ended up seeing each other at Disneyland again. My then girlfriend worked there. And she was there with her boyfriend, okay? And I mean, I'm way better looking and more charming, but whatever, that's neither here nor there. So I see them, and they're together, and I'm with my girlfriend, and our eyes meet, and now we have to talk. So I'm like, hey, how are you? And I'm trying to be pleasant, and she's trying to be pleasant. And I was just like, oh, man. And we were walking away. I was walking with my girlfriend, and as we were walking, I'm just like thinking about it. She's like, what are you thinking about? I could tell something's on your mind. I'm like, she looked frumpy, right? She looked frumpy to you? She goes, no, I didn't think she looked frumpy. Oh, okay. How about her teeth? Her teeth are green. I don't know, maybe she was eating salad or something. They look greenish to you? No, I didn't. In fact, I thought she was kind of pretty. I'm like, I know, yikes. Why is she still pretty? Why? I didn't want her to be pretty. I wanted her to have green teeth and frumpy, but she was still gorgeous. And I was like, oh, I know that. And here's the thing. If you were, and she looks the same as she did in college, really. So I finally realized it's because, well, now I'm married to her, she takes care of herself, she eats well, she exercises, she does all that. And that's why she was still able to maintain this beauty that she has. I didn't want her to be like that. But there was something about that. Whenever you see somebody that's doing well, something inside of you is like, I wonder how they're doing so well. You know, even just recently, our own Bobby Bahama, right? He just dropped a lot of weight. And I was like, Bobby, dude, how did you do it? My first question is, how did you do it? You look great. And he told me it was a lot of work. He had the stomach flu and he was gone. And then a couple little moments later, he said, actually, in addition to that, I have been eating very well. I've been exercising. And there was something in me that wanted to know how he's doing. And that's something that we all have inside. We don't always like to admit it. But when we see somebody doing something well, we want to know, how are they doing it? What are they doing that's different? Now, there's a reason for that. Now, we want to know why people who are doing well are doing well, especially if the thing they're having success with is something that we've all struggled with. We want to know why they're doing so well, especially if it's that thing that we've struggled with, okay? Now, a lot of times, we're reluctant to ask for a lot of reasons. So we want to ask, but the first reaction is, I wish I would have known that sooner. Man, they're doing really well. I wish I would have known that sooner. The people that are doing well are reluctant to even say anything because they might be thinking, I'm going to tell them what I'm doing, but then they're going to think, well, who are you to tell me? Or that doesn't work for me, or I've already tried that. It just doesn't work, so sorry. And then others of us are embarrassed to ask why because we're struggling with it, and we don't want anybody else to know that we're struggling with it. So it could be like, hey, how did you lose all that weight? Well, I don't want anybody to know I'm struggling with my weight, so I just don't want to say anything. How did you get out of debt? Well, I don't want anybody to know I'm in debt. How did you get your relationship back together? Well, I don't want anybody knowing that my relationship's not very good. So we actually don't ask, even though we should ask that, because what they're doing might actually work for you. But we don't want to because we're just like, well, I don't want them to think that I'm struggling with this. And then we like to assume everything's okay. And then we go through life thinking everything's okay. I could take care of myself. I don't really need anybody else. I'm good. But eventually, again, all that stuff is gonna bubble up, and then it won't be good. And then you'll be forced to look at your situation. You'll be forced to ask yourself the tough questions. You'll be forced to say, okay, I need to re-examine my life, reconfigure what I've been thinking. Now, this actually happens to Paul in the Bible, back when his name was Saul. Saul was a very religious Jew who believed that Jesus' followers were terrible. They were a threat to everything that he was about. They were a threat to his faith. They were a threat to his community, his culture, basically him. And he was out to stop them by any means necessary. We see this in Acts 9:1. It says, Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest. Now, to be clear, guys, this is not a weekend hobby for Saul. This is something that he breathed, lived, was all consumed by. He was like, I got to get rid of them. And then you might think, well, that's pretty harsh, you know, just because they don't agree with you. I mean, why would you want to get rid of them? That sounds pretty harsh to do that. But in his mind, I'm right. and they're wrong. I am justified in doing this because I'm right. And everything that I believe is right, and they're wrong, so therefore I am justified in doing it. Now, some people could have looked at him and said, well, that's just how he is. Or other people could have said, well, that's just the way culture is. And some people could have said, that's not very healthy. But to be honest, he didn't care one way or the other because he said, I'm right, and that's that. One day, a bright light comes out of the sky and literally knocks him off of his high horse, okay? A booming voice causes him now to rethink everything that he's been doing. A booming voice caused him to pause and rethink everything that that he thought was right. And all of a sudden, guys, after this booming voice knocks him off of his high horse and causes him to rethink everything he's been doing, all of a sudden he stops. For the first time, he stops and he re-examines his life. And the reality of what he's been involved with was so overwhelming, it causes a depression in him. Because everything he thought was right wasn't. Guys, you've heard me talk a lot about my mom and things like that, but you don't talk too much about my dad. But I want to let you know, my dad was a really good guy. His name was Chuck. You would have liked Chuck a lot. He was funny. He likes to tell jokes. He was just a real fun-loving guy. Really, really good dude. But in 1988, he listened to the wrong people. And he left us and my mom. And my mom begged him to stay, and he just said, this isn't the right thing for me to do, and he left. We begged him to stay. Didn't change the fact that he's not a good guy. He was still a good guy. He just listened to the wrong people. And so he immediately wanted this financial settlement to be done because he wanted his own life. And he was convinced he was totally right. He was convinced of that. He really felt, I'm doing the right thing. In his mind, he felt like this is it. It wasn't until a couple of years later that he was forced to really examine his life. And when he stopped for the first time, because he was always like on to something new, when he actually stopped, he realized that everything he was doing was wrong and hurtful. It wasn't mean that he was a bad guy. It just meant that he believed the wrong things. He had people in his life, especially people in his family, that were saying, Chuck, just slow down. I can't slow down. I got to make this happen. Just take a pause. I can't take a pause. I've got to make this happen. This has got to happen. Please, just rethink this. I can't rethink this. I'm right. She's wrong. Everybody else is wrong. And then finally, when he had time to really sit in this, he was like, I have been wrong. And it caused a depression in him. And if you were to have met him then, you wouldn't have recognized the person that was before that happened. He was no longer fun and confident and fun-loving. He was sad and depressed and hurt. And it took a toll on him. And it was tough. And so he went through the rest of his life really in a tough spot. And I always felt so awful for him because I'm thinking, that's not the life God has for you. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a bad choice. But you know what? God's got something else for you. And you can absolutely rebound from this. And he believed in God, but he spent the rest of his life in this really tough spot. And he had a hard time moving past this. In fact, my mother and him actually became very close friends, best friends. And when my mom passed in 2010, he was shattered. And in 2012, when he had a stroke, we could barely understand what he was saying. And we asked, what do you want? And barely understood him saying, I want to be with your mom. So he had recognized, I made a mistake, right? And when that realization hits you when you make a mistake, guys, that could cause a depression. And the enemy wants to keep you in that depressive state. Because I don't want you to get healthy. I want you to feel guilty the rest of your life. I want you to feel like you ruined everything the rest of your life. I don't want you to actually get healthy or better. But he was in a really tough spot. It was a very difficult season for him. Now, for Saul, the light was so bright that he literally loses his sight for 3 days. Acts 9:8-9 says this. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by hand into Damascus. And for 3 days, he was blind, didn't eat or drink anything. Now, he realizes he's blind. This is an interesting metaphor because he realizes that everything he thought was right wasn't. And all he does for 3 days is he sits in this and he can't see anything. And he's just rethinking and recalibrating everything in his life. And it's causing him to really start to look at everything and really realize that everything he valued was wrong. Everything he put his time and attention in was wrong. It was actually keeping him away from the thing that he really wanted. Now, some depressive episodes are our body's way of telling us that there's something off about the way we've organized our existence. It's our soul's way of slowing us down. okay? To re-examine, recalibrate what's going on. And a lot of times, guys, we think we're better, but we're actually not. We might be having a good day, but it doesn't mean we're healthy. And that's why I said last week, one of the biggest bummers about being a pastor is when people come to church because they need church. They need community. They need love. They need support. Maybe their finances are bad. Maybe their health is bad. Maybe their relationships are bad. So they come to church to get healthy. And then they start to feel healthy again. They go, I'm good now. I don't need church anymore. I don't really need other people anymore. My finances are better. My health is better. My relationship's better. I'm good to go. I'm good now. But you're not. You've got to really take the time to invest in this, to sit in this, to recalibrate this. It's a lifelong journey of being healthy. And it's not like, well, now that I'm having a good day, everything is fine now. You got to make sure that you're constantly giving this back to God. Saul is clearly troubled, guys. He doesn't eat or drink anything. What is that? That's depression. I can't do anything. I can't get out of bed. I can't eat. I can't drink. I'm depressed. Now, when we experience depression, it doesn't feel good. So, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, our brains are geared to survive. So what we do is we try to get rid of this emotion as quickly as possible. Whenever we're feeling depressed, I want this to go away. I'll drink something, I'll do something, I'll sleep with somebody, I'll get out of this thing, but I just need this to get out of me so fast, I don't want to be depressed. So I want this feeling to get out of my life so fast. But that's not going to help because once that episode is over, you're still going to have those feelings. But go with me here, guys, because the enemy is going to tell you this depressive state is what's going to destroy you. That's a lie. That's not true. If you're in that state, you are not being destroyed. That's a lie from the enemy. It's not true. But if you're in this depressive state, guys, maybe if you're watching online or if you're here and you're in that state right now where you're just stuck and you're in this depressive state, go with me for a second. Go with me. What if this season, this depressive state season you're in, is actually a gift? You might think, dude, you're the worst gift giver ever. Poor Melanie had an anniversary last week. I hate to see what you got her, like dead flowers. What did you do? It's like, but think about this. What if it's a gift? Wouldn't it be a shame to waste it? Here's the thing. After 3 days, God sends somebody to guide Saul forward. Acts 9:17 says this. Then Ananias went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes and he could see again. He got up and was baptized. And after taking some food, he regained his strength. So literally, he's seeing for the first time. Now, here's a couple things that happens. A mature Christian counsels him and prays for him. That's why church is so important. You need other people, other faith believers to help encourage you. So he's getting mentoring, care, advice. He receives the Holy Spirit, divine power, wisdom, guidance. He gains clarity. He gets an understanding of what his next step should be. And he starts eating again. He starts taking care of his body. But he doesn't just jump back to his life. He actually takes time to recalibrate altogether. And honestly, he spends a lot of time on it. Again, guys, we want so bad to go, we're good now, I'm good now, I'm good. I'm off and running. I don't need help, I don't need people, I don't need church. I'll pray whenever I have a meal, but I'm busy. And we want to hurry up and go. He doesn't. He sits in it. He takes time with this. Galatians 1:16 says this, to reveal his son in me so that I may preach him among the Gentiles. My immediate response was not to consult any human being. I did not go to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went to Arabia. Later, I returned to Damascus. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to get acquainted with Cephas and stayed with him for 15 days. Now let's pretend that we're back in the time of Paul, and if you would have seen Saul, you would have said, that guy's crazy. He's a murderous nut guy that wants to kill Christians. And then if you see him now, you would see he's a far different person. Your first reaction might be, dude, how did you do it? What happened to you? How did you get this healthy? Like, what did you do? Now, here's the thing. It took time. And this is the one thing we don't want to do. We don't. Some of us can't even give an hour on a Sunday. I don't want to give time because I got other things I got to do, So we don't like stopping and giving time to things because we're constantly, I got to move. I got another thing. But he says, I just have to stop and take time. Guys, listen to me right now. We started this church 3 years ago. And if somebody would have said, we're going to start a new church in South Orange County, and I'm going to give you a building in Talega to start off with, I would have said, Boot, sign me up. That's not the story of this church, though. We started in a gym that we had to put 15-pound carpet squares on the ground just to put chairs on there. And then we came here with no facility for our kids, no signage, and no parking. 3 things that actually destroy a church, right? And then COVID. I mean, it's a miracle we're here, truly, right? But what if God was trying to show us something in that 3 years? What if he says, I'm purposefully holding on to something for you because I want you to be different from the way you are now to the time I bless you with this church. I want my church to be different, in a different place, because I have plans that are bigger than what you think. My plans are bigger than parking spaces and signs. And you're not going to understand that if I just hand it over to you. I am teaching you something from this to that. It would be a shame to waste it. And that's why it's actually a blessing that has taken 3 years. Because when we go there, we're going to be a different church because we've spent time getting to know each other, getting to know what our priorities are, getting to know what our goals are, and who we want to be. Now, a good question for us today is, how much time do you give to reflecting on and reorganizing your life in a healthy way? And do you at all? Some of you might say, I just don't have time, Pastor. I got a lot of other things I got going on. This is busy season. Now, here's what I think. I think that there's enough evidence that Paul spent a lot of time during those 3 years to recalibrate his life. So when it comes to talking about what we've been talking about the past several weeks, here's the deal. Here's what it boils down to. Maintaining our mental health requires that we acknowledge and address our pace, our patterns, our predicaments, and our perceptions. And we're going to break them down quickly one by one. First is pace, how fast we go and how much we do. So pace, how fast we go and how much do we do. Now, when you hear pace, your first reaction is they must be saying I got to slow down because life's, not a sprint, it's a marathon. But maybe it's you need to speed up, but you need to be at a healthy pace. Now, for some people, they could run an entire race and be okay. For other people, you need to pass them the baton, and maybe they could only run a short leg. Vic was a track coach. He knows everybody runs at a different pace, so you got to put people at different paces, right? But whether you only run a short leg or you can run around the whole track, it doesn't mean you don't get to run the race. You still got to run it. You just have to run it at your pace. It's got to be at the way that God's geared you. So here's an important thing to remember about pace and about how you organize yourself. Overexerting yourself exhausts you. And underexerting yourself makes anything seem exhausting. So if you don't understand your pace, that's very important, then overexerting yourself is going to exhaust you, and underexerting yourself is going to make everything seem exhausting. So here's a checklist, and I'm going to give this to you. You may not, we have a slide of it, so you don't have to write it down. You can take a picture of it. But ask yourself these questions. When was the last time you had a pacing conversation with those you share life with? How much are you able to do, and what pace? What breaks do you need? And what might you need to opt out of or alter the expectations of? And what activities will drain you? Ask yourself those questions. Really be honest with yourself. Ask yourself those questions. Ask other people to grade you on that too, because your perception might be very different from how they see you. So you might want to ask yourself those questions. Now, the next is patterns. How we do what we do on repeat. Now, a lot of us do things out of a flawed understanding of what our value comes from. A lot of us have a very flawed understanding of value, especially our value. So what we do is we end up exhausting ourselves doing the wrong things because we think that that's valuable. I have to have my kid in every single sport in the world. So we're driving around all over the place. So now they're exhausted and they're tired and they're not doing good in school because they're constantly running around. But I've got to do that. I've got to work 100 hours a week because I've got to afford the pool and I got to afford the bigger house and I've got to do this. And so a little birdie's not going to just hand this to me. I've got to do all this stuff. But then they're being exhausted. And so they have a flawed view of what value is. So they think value is stuff and things, but they're not really putting their value or their time in the right things. So they're just getting really exhausted, And then some people think, well, you know what? It's not me, it's everyone around me. So if I just get a new relationship, if I move out of the state, if I just get a new job, then I'll be good. then I'm good. If I just change my scenery, then I'll be good. But guys, listen to me. If you're not healthy on the inside, then you're going to take this unhealthy person into another relationship, and that's going to be toxic. And then you're going to take this unhealthy person into a new state, and that'll be toxic. In Idaho and Texas and Florida, they'll say, go back. You know, if you're not healthy on the inside, changing your job isn't going to make everything better because you're not healthy. So it's just not everybody else's fault. You've got to really address that on your own. You got to really look in yourself on that. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth, guys. If you change your setting without changing your habits, you'll stay stuck. And a lot of us are in a really deep, dark depression because we're just doing the same thing over and over and over, and then we keep blaming God on why I'm not better. Well, because you're doing the same unhealthy things. Then we're talking about being drained. Drained doesn't really mean exhausting. You could be exhausted doing some really good things for some really good people. And it's not just caring for somebody mentally, it's also caring for them physically. You could be doing some really good things for somebody physically, but you're just exhausted trying to help them, whether it's a mental issue or a physical issue. You're exhausted helping them. Now you're in a depressive state because you have no energy. You're drained. You are completely tapped out. You're trying to do everything for everybody. And maybe you just need to learn how to say no. You know, some of us are, take pride. I'm in 20 different Bible studies. So don't blame me because you can't say no to 20 different people. You're just exhausted. I'm in doing all this stuff. Well, you're draining yourself. You're doing too much. It's okay to say no. Some people are like, well, if I say no, nobody's going to like me. Now, here's a question. When was the last time you combed through the patterns and determined which were helping and which were hurting you? When was the last time you combed through your patterns and determined which were helping you and which were hurting you? See, what some people find invigorating, some other people just find draining. It's true. I have a buddy of mine who literally outriggered from Dana Point to Catalina Island. And he's like, dude, it felt great. You want to go with me? No, ever. I love the ocean. I don't want to be barfing in it. I'm puking after the first mile. I don't want to go do that. That's invigorating to me. That's draining. It's awful. I find it's more invigorating to get in a large boat with a large engine with some nice little finger foods and relaxing, right? Cable TV and Wi-Fi. I'm not interested in outriggering the Catalina. That's not good. So here's the main point. Just be you. Know you, be you. And again, invite other people in on that, because if you don't do this right, it will cause you to be very depressed, very, very out of it. So next is predicaments. What's happened around us and what it requires of us. Now, the reality of your life is that they're all things that we really don't want to admit to dealing with. Now, guys, we all have goals in our life. And it's whether it's I want to get this job or this position or move in this house or be in this relationship. But guys, here's the deal. If you're not dealing with your stuff, those goals aren't going to feel very good. Okay, I know people that have finally attained a lot, and it didn't make their problems go away because they still weren't good on the inside. So when we have these goals, you're thinking, finally I got this house, or finally I got this relationship, or whatever it is. It's really not going to keep you fulfilled very long because you still need to be working on yourself. But I want to give some of you a break. Some of you are in a depressive state for the opposite reason. You feel that you're not where you should be. So what I mean by that is, I'm at this age, so at this age, I should be married, I should have these amount of kids, and they should all be in karate and softball and soccer and swimming and water polo and whatever else, and I should be living in this community with all this stuff, and this is where my life should be at this stage. Well, what happens if you're not married? What happens if you've been divorced? What happens if you're a single parent? What happens if you've never been married? What happens if you've never had kids? Does that mean you're somehow below the curve? No, absolutely not. But so you give yourself a break. Everybody's at different spots. And if you compare yourself to everybody else's life, and you say, I should have their life at this stage of my life, it's going to cause a depression in you because that's them. That's not your story. That's not your life. You've got to go. That's why it's so important to be connected to God, to go where He is having you go and what He is having you do. Everyone's story is different, so give yourself a break. And the last one is perceptions, how we look at life and what we repeat to ourselves. Now, Some of us have a very skewed view of something, and it changes how we experience everything. And how Paul was, his eyes were finally open to some pretty major incorrect assumptions. If you have if you're feeling like that, ask yourself a couple questions. What are your what are your false perceptions? What are your perceptions of the world, of yourself, of what's valuable? Because what you might learn is maybe some of those perceptions aren't always right. And you've got to really deal with that. You've got to really ask yourself those questions. Maybe they are, but some of them are not. And some of us get stuck in our perception, and then that's it. We're all right, and everybody else is wrong. That's it. That's what it is. And some of us need to understand that when we wake up in the morning, if we have a perception that that day is going to stink, it's going to stink. Have you ever met anybody like that? Well, you wake up in the morning, how you doing? Well, weather's nice again, who cares? And it's probably going to be a bad day anyway. And, I call that I guess I'll eat some worms thing, where it's like, everything's bad. And so then your day is going to be bad, I don't want to go to this event. This event's going to be boring. That event's going to be boring, I don't want a new job because I don't want this new boss in my life because it's probably going to be a jerk like the old boss. Then that boss is going to be a jerk to you. We psych ourselves out so often of what we tell ourselves, and then we walk around in this depressive funk because we've told ourselves that this is going to stink, and it does. You're guaranteed if you tell yourself that it's going to stink. We have this perception that this thing is going to be bad. It's going to be bad. Now, in our world right now, one of the biggest problems about perceptions of how we see others are two things: 24-hour cable news and social media. Now, here's why. We get this perception that if you watch this channel as opposed to this channel, we're the right ones and they're the wrong ones. That's already first. Then I'm going to express all of my opinion on social media and then fight on social media, and then you're going to get more angry, and somebody's living in your head, and they may live in Wisconsin. You're like, see what that jerk said to me on social media about so-and-so? It's like, what? And we're in this work walking around angry because my perception of this person is this because they watch this channel or that channel. Think about this for a second. Let's say you really love CNN, and you're going to go to lunch with someone you've seen on social media that loves Fox. You're going to go to that lunch going, this person's going to be ignorant and lame, and I'm not going to like them. Or vice versa. If you're going out with somebody that's watches the other show, the other channel, I'm already not going to like them. You can look at what they like on social media. You can look at who they follow, and you already, before you even meet them, are not going to like them. And it's going to cause you to change who you are. You might be a really fun person, but you're already got this thing that you're ready to go. Let me let you in on a little secret. Our politicians do this to us on purpose, okay? They want you to be divided. That's how they stay in power. They love 24-hour cable news. They love social media. They love us fighting against you. They love it because that means that you're now on my side and you get to keep me in power. And I hear politicians spew out these ridiculous lies all the time about, I just love my country and I just want to serve my country. Then you know what? Serve for 4 years and move on. Amen. These are people that have been there for 50 years, right? And by the way, when they started, they had this much money, and now they have this much money. So you are literally keeping them in power by the more we fight with each other in our perception of this side and this side. Just look at people for who they are and just be willing to listen to them. Just listen. Guys, I'm going to let you off the hook, and I'm going to let our country off the hook right now because we're at an all-time rager right now of anger. It's okay to disagree. It's okay. It's fine. You don't have to agree on everything. Somebody sold us this bill of goods that you got to agree on everything or the other person's enemy. No, you don't. You could disagree. That's okay. That's fine. But we're so amped up and revved up. So ask yourself, what do you repeat to yourself that's hurting you and not helping you? And maybe you're thinking that's a lot of work. Yeah, it is. Getting right mentally is just like getting right physically. It's going to take work. It's going to take working out at it. It's not going to be easy, So we got to stop pretending like it is. So what do we need to do? How might your current pace, patterns, predicaments, and perceptions be problematic to the level of mental and emotional health God wants you to experience? Ask yourself that question. What changes might you need to make? And what lies have you told yourself about why that you can't? Now, understand this. If this is you, Paul got better. Okay? You're going to get better. And you got to believe that. I love what he writes here in this letter to the Philippians, in Philippians 3:12. Not that I have already obtained all this or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. You know, yes, living the life God has for you will require that you learn your strengths and your weaknesses and you put the work in to feel whole. Some of you do not remember when the last time you felt whole was. You're either beating the heck out of yourself because you feel guilty about something. You're just trying to get through life because you're exhausted all the time. You're running around like a chicken with a head cut off trying to make everybody happy. You don't even remember the last time you felt whole. You know, maybe you need to be reminded of this and know this, that you're not alone in this. Philippians 1:6. Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. And this is coming from someone that knows exactly where you're at. He's saying God's got you. You see, working on you, while you're working on you, God is working in you. And when you see someone doing well, guys, don't be afraid to ask them how they're doing it. Ask them. That's why I love the church. You don't have to have pride here. You just say, man, I'm struggling. I'm not doing well here. You know, let us know. Put it on your prayer request. Let us know so we can come alongside you. Now, you can get better. Others have gotten better before you, and maybe they do it differently than you do, but they'll be there to help you out. You know, you just have to make sure that you're including them in on that. The same God that guided Paul is the same God that's going to guide you. Now, guys, again, that's another reason why I've dedicated the rest of my life to God's church. You're not going to get this anywhere else, guys. It's not about self-help, and it's not about even tough love, and it's not about I'm just going to recite these really good whimsical poems and I'll feel better, or if I think happy thoughts, I'll be good. It's not like that. Being a Christ follower means that you do life with people. And God said, you're not going to be able to figure this out on your own, so I'm going to put my church here, his church here, right? We are serving his church. He said, I'm going to put my church there because I want my kids to have each other, to encourage each other. And if they don't know me, I want them to get to know me there. And that's why this is going to be a process of the rest of our lives. And I've committed the rest of my life to serving God in his church so that I can be part of the solution. Because there are people that are coming to church who don't feel that they're good enough, or don't feel that their life is where it needs to be, or don't feel that they're at the point where they should be. And they feel depressed, and they feel like this is never going to end, and I can't tell anybody about it because it's embarrassing. And we're here to say, no, we're going to do this together, trusting on God, on who he is. So no, I'm not going to just do church until things calm down, and I'll go back to whatever else I was doing. This is the thing that I'm going to do the rest of my life, serving him in his church. This is the only thing that's going to be able to help you. Whatever it is you're going through, he can do this. We're going to commit to putting in the hard work, and we're going to commit to doing that together. And if you've got something going on, please let us know about it so we could learn from. And if you're coming out of a season that was really tough, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Someone needs to hear that. If you're getting out of some major financial help, say, hey, I'd like to start something. I've gotten through this. This is pretty good. I'd like to help. Anybody needs help, let me know. I'm start a small group. I've gotten through some pretty bad depression, and things are working for me pretty well. I want to start a small group if you're struggling with this. I've had some financial issues, relationship issues. I've got some health issues. I'm caring for a loved one. I feel like I'm in a good place. Somebody else needs your support. So let them know it. Let us know it. Don't hold it to yourself. If you got stuff working for you, let it out. And if you need it, don't be proud. I need that. I'm in a tough spot. I need that. And we're going to do this together, okay? Let's pray. Father.